Hello, everyone. We are live. So, good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon, dear attendees, dear guests. I'm glad to welcome you this week to the episode number 6 of our L-DIH Talks. The episode today's open the section number 3, which is dedicated to attract talents and improve existing skills. We all know that human beings remain the central and essential element of a successful digital transformation. Therefore, we wanted today to really highlight the importance of cultural change based on human-centrics. I am pleased today to welcome our guest speakers, Laurent Probst from PwC, Michel Moutier from MLC Advisory, Isabella Milewska from Amazon Web Services. Three of them, they will be presenting and they will take you through how to identify and redefine talents and how to create an innovative work culture. So this is very important. And as usual, we will close our session with a case study from a company. This time it is going to be WashTech cleaning company from Germany. So unfortunately, Eckhart Gatteris, the SVP head of a global operation who was supposed to do the presentation, had last minute event. So Lothar Merz, CTO of Stremler, will be presenting on behalf of Mr. Eckhart Gatteris. So without any further delay, before I forget, as usual, don't forget to push your question in the question tabs. Use the chat for the chat and the question for the questions, and then we will try to answer on this question by the end of each presentation. If you still have any other question, we will take it after by the end of this session. So I'll stop here, and I would like to welcome Laurent Probst, partner at PwC Luxembourg. Laurent, who will be present us what does it mean the right time to redefine the right workforce. Laurent, it's yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and many thanks, Marina, for the intro. So I try to be quite concrete today about this, I would say, a strategic issue of redefining the right workforce. I think more than ever, we are today in a situation where the definition of the right skills, the right number of people for a corporate makes a lot of sense. Next slide. So today, what we see is that we are moving towards a must-have workforce. Corporates do not have room for unskilled workforce, or they do not have room anymore for unproductive workforce. We see the new paradigm shifts, like the new Green Deal, like I would say the gig economy, or I would say more and more, I would say a redefinition of the supply chain. We see at the same time the development and the emergence of the new technologies and the adoption of these new technologies. And then here now we have the big impact of this crisis. And this big impact of the crisis put at risk a lot of corporates, a lot of sectors, which are just looking for keeping the revenues, or now looking at cost and investment reduction to survive. And then in that totally uncertain environment, what is the right workforce? That meaning not only the number of FTEs, but more importantly, what is the right skills portfolio for our strategy? So the must-have workforce has to be defined, and we are currently, as an example, working with automotive industries and big EU manufacturer like PSA or Renault and others, who have now more, I would say, about half of their workforce unemployed, on short-term unemployment, and they have to redefine really, I would say, their core strategy, product strategy in light of a new Green Deal, CO2 emissions, and then say, okay, what should we keep now as a core strategy for our future? And that's really, for each corporate, a very, I would say, key challenge. Next slide. So what is strategic workforce planning? And let's set the expectations. It's how do you reshape your workforce that you have such that you have the right people to execute your strategy, the right skills, and to constantly adapt to the current uncertain environment. So it's a capability, it's a set of skills that you have to redefine this workforce. It's an ongoing process. It's a long-term vision between 2 and 5 years. It's a set of skills that you need to have into your HR department and in the business unit for this specific process. It's a very collaborative model between the business units. It's an investment, clearly in time, because it requires a specific mobilization of leadership. And it's a clear vision and a shared vision about the future of a corporate. And at the end, what is not, it's not a single tool that will provide, I would say, the answer. It's not just an Excel file, or it's not just really just some papers. It's an end-to-end exercise which has to be done at a corporate level in a very, very serious way. Next. So just to give you an example, for instance, we did it for the Swiss railway. And what we did, it was just done before the COVID crisis by end of the year. We defined two scenarios. One scenario which was aggressive technology adoption inside the Swiss railway staff, which is about 26,000 people, and then a moderated technology adoption scenario. The perspective was to look at, I would say, the inflows and outflows of companies. It was about the analysis of technology adoption by business unit. It was about the analysis and the requirements in terms of strategic skills by business unit. And then at the end, it was about consolidating a framework of core strategic skills at the corporate level. Then you can see on the right side, I would say, the evolution of the two scenarios. So the first scenario is the moderated scenario, and the second one is a more aggressive scenario. And you can see in yellow, orange, the new jobs created by the technology adoptions, really the new job created at SBB. And you can see in red the jobs which have been to some extent transformed or significantly reduced, due also to the augmented capacity of technology. But at the end, what was interesting into that was you can see that the staff of SBB still augment. So I think here the point is with strategic workforce planning is really to see some specific detailed approach where you can kill also some internal, I would say, myths. Next. Here you can see also in this case, I would say the evolution of skills and the requirement of strategic skills according to the scenario, which are not the same. So I will not go into the details, but you have more or less here 13 core strategic skills for SBB, and you can see that the most aggressive scenario will require a much more important development than the second one. And we have worked also with Airbus, for instance, and Airbus has the same approach, defining by business unit the core framework of 18 strategic core skills, consolidated then at a corporate level. And then once they get this core strategic skills framework, this will impact the recruitment strategy, the training strategy, and the reward strategy. Next. So here, to help you to define this strategic workforce planning, today we need tools, because I would say there are too many factors, too many variables to integrate into a model, to do that only in Excel. So next. The first tool that we can use as an example is a tool of AI, artificial intelligence, and data analytics, which integrate the impact of technology on jobs. So for instance, here you can see on the left side a portfolio of different technologies, mainly linked to AI in that case, which can demonstrate that how technology adoption will impact a job on the right. And that will be, I would say, something which is very important, for instance, for the first job. I don't know if you're able to read it, but it's manufacturing technician. For instance, that might be really the most impacted by the adoption of new technologies. So to what extent this job will be provided new capacity, new productive capacity by the technology, or to what extent this job will be removed? I think these are some key questions to ask. Then, next slide, we can see that, for instance, in another screen, that we have, I would say, on the left, we say the new jobs created by technologies. which are in that case, for instance, software engineers. And the objective is really to look at the internal workforce and to say who in our corporate would be able to take this job. Do we have a view on the current skills portfolio of our people? How do we fix the gap in terms of skills that these jobs which are created are first, I would say, filled by our internal staff and not just by external recruitment? Because this is also a big room for savings. So these tools are able to build scenario, to provide you with a vision, to test and to check hypotheses with your business leaders. Next slide. Then, once you have this result, it's interesting to look also at the workforce perspective. So we have developed also a specific tool to analyze the talent supply, internal and external, where business unit leaders will provide, I would say, their input into the, I would say, their perspective about their workforce. And you can see on the right, it's perhaps too small here, but it's a tool to factor, I would say, the mobility between departments and between business units. So a business unit leader will say, I will need in the future 5 or 6 engineers in that field. Another one will say, okay, due to technologies, perhaps I will have, I will need less engineers than before. So then through this tool, you can consolidate the potential of internal mobility and maximize this impact, which will reduce directly the cost of recruitment and at the same time the cost of departures. And we have seen that most of the corporates today, they don't look so much at this internal mobility rate, and this is easily I would say, augmented by a good planning. Next. So what we are using for this is a kind of a phased approach where we have, I would say, three major stages. Phase A, where we consider the business strategy and understand how this might change in the future. And we model that with the demand for talent and skills and build some relevant scenarios for the strategy. In phase B, this is about gaining a deep understanding on the skills required to deliver future activity. And we will review clearly possible skills gap and identify where they exist and at what level. And phase C is about to define and develop the plans to remediate existing gaps, okay, through upskilling or through specific recruitment or through partnership. So these are 3 phases which are quite traditional and will really help to get some short-term results. Next. Here, I would focus, you have a set of examples here on the, I would say, the different potential solutions to remediate gaps. Today, I will focus on one which is very important, which is mobility, because in this current situation, most of the companies have, I would say, surplus workforce, and it's quite tough to see how to manage that in the current environment. So I think here the point is really to look at what we see in the automotive sector in Europe is to look at how can we check the mobility inside the company. If it's not inside the company, inside the sector, and if it's not inside the sector, outside of the sector. Generally, it has to be managed, coordinated in a local area, in a region or in a local labor market. And I think this is highly important to manage this mobility, to make sure that corporates which have vacant jobs could fulfill very rapidly these available jobs to get really productive revenues, and at the same time for corporates who have a surplus of workforce being able really to find, I would say, a good solution for their people. So the mobility dimension that we see today is really one of the most critical, one of the most complex, and one way to get a good strategy on the mobility is to do first this workforce planning. Next. So as a conclusion, I think it's really at the time where we see this workforce surplus, I think we still have to keep in mind that today, in this uncertain environment, the most important asset of a company or of a country remain the skills portfolio of the workforce. And this is really core. So the strategic workforce planning is really a tool to really better plan investments or disinvestments in some, I would say, corporate project. It's also important to understand that through mobility, you can significantly reduce layoff cost and really bring new value to the corporate. What we have seen in the past and in concrete experiences was that about for €1 invested into upskilling for mobility, internal or external, the corporate could save at least €2 minimum. And in some sectors, I would say we have seen it was 1 for 10. So I think there are several set of ideas and savings here for corporates to think about it. We should not forget the main challenge, which is in many cases for medium-sized companies, I would say the capacities, the capabilities of the HR department. It's clear that the HR department has to be supported by additional resources to that. Not only tools, methodologies, but clearly people to make it work. And the tools, new tools are on the market, which are really good and could really significantly help the corporate to do that. And at the end, my main point is to say, don't forget that this is about really the skills, this is about fixing the mindset gap, and not only just the number of FTEs. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Laurent. So there is a question which is not in the questions tab. Maybe you can say it, but I'm going to say it. So someone is asking, will you work with national, regional, local governments to help with the skills and job forecast, workforce planning? Have you been asked for it, maybe?
Yeah, we are working with different governments at regional, national, and EU level for it, by sectors also. So we used to work with the Luxembourg government. We are currently working with the automotive sector at EU level, and in some regions like Porto, where we are building up a kind of a skills observatory, for instance, to be able to detect real-time the new needs in terms of skills to facilitate the uptake of new jobs.
Okay, thank you. So I have a question, but I'm going to keep it till the end of the session because we would like to go with our next speaker. Thank you very much. So I would like to introduce our next speaker. So Michel Moutier, he is the co-founder of MLC Advisory. Michel will be presenting and talking why it's really important to have innovative culture within the team, inside the team, and how this would impact highly the skills and, of course, the work. It is important to get a good work. Michel, it's yours.
Thank you very much. Yeah, as Marina has just said, I'm going to talk about work culture and how is it important. Very often when we talk about culture, people think that it's not pragmatic enough, and we are talking about it for quite a long time. And in these presentations, we have identified a couple of, I would say, pragmatic levers you can use or play on if you want to analyze your culture, identify where maybe you have things which are not 100% consistent, and or change your culture if you wish to do it. Okay, next. Oh, was the end. I'm going to start with that. AI is growing, and it means that, as already said, quite a couple of tasks were previously done by humans are going to be done by AI, robots, and so on and so forth. But there's very good news for people. The very good news is that people will have to shift and to focus on other type of activities. We could maybe say that these activities are going to be with more added value. And in those activities, we're going to include innovation, excellence, and last but not least, forging deep human connections, meaning it's going to be more and more important just to work together because it's going to be the basis for a peak performance. And in that respect, in 2012, Google did a very interesting study. They were wondering why in their teams worldwide, some teams were doing very well and had a high level of performance, and why others were not doing so well. The very first, and they did it 180 teams worldwide. The very first question was to say maybe the best teams are made up of the best individuals, meaning individuals with better competencies, and or maybe in those teams we could find individual with some specific traits, like maybe there's a high proportion of extrovert or things like that. Wrong. Maybe they thought, as some football teams did, if I have a lot of money and put all the best people on the field, I'm going to win. And the results were extremely interesting. The results they found were not that the teams were lead to competencies or things like that, but the 5 factors here were the most important. The number 1 factor, and it's absolutely key, it's psychological safety and trust, meaning the ability of all the people to feel that they can say what they have to say, they can take responsibilities whenever they need it, but also, and it's very important when talking about innovation, if they made a mistake, they can do it, meaning that they can think out of the box and take a certain level of risk. The second thing they found was mutual accountability. And mutual accountability is very much linked to the number 1 point. Because if I feel that I'm in a psychological, safety, trustworthy environment, I'm going to be keen to take responsibility. And so I'm going to feel accountable. And as we are all working together, that's the reason why we'll have this mutual accountability. The 3 other points were a bit different, having clear roles and goals, which is something we find very often when we want teams to be successful, but also meaning, which is, it's very important that what we do, we see the direction where we go. We see that every day when we're working in teams, we know it's worth doing it because we have a clear view of where we are going. And the number 5, which is impact, is the team wanted that what they do, they feel it has an impact on the topic they are currently dealing with. So it was quite an important discovery for them. And the next question is, okay, based on that, how do we build that culture of trust and psychological safety? To try to make it pragmatic, we have identified 4 pillars which you can work on and around. Number 1, no surprise, is leadership. Leadership being vision, of course, but more importantly, values and style. And talking about values, what is extremely important is that those values are don't remain values which are sticked on the wall, but you derive from these values competencies, expected competencies, and concrete actions. And of course, leadership style has an extremely huge impact. Then the second pillar to the right are going to be the managers. And managers, one important thing is autonomy, meaning that if you want to create a culture of trust and psychological safety, it's extremely important that you avoid micromanagement. And then you can find exemplarity, of course, confidence, but also the ability from the managers to foster engagement. For teams, communication, empowerment, of course, we would have guessed this one. And in the HR processes, and this bit is also extremely important, things like job description, annual review, appraisal, rewards. For example, if your reward system is, if you reward behaviors which are different from your values and the kind of culture you want to promote, you're going to have a huge problem because people will behave in a totally different way. The key word on that is consistency. If you want to build that culture, you need to ensure that on these various pillars, what you do is 100% consistent. Here are a couple of examples of things you can implement to build a culture of trust and psychological safety. Recognizing excellence, yes, of course, but what is important is recognizing it in public. And studies have shown that it has far more impact. That the goal you are going to define, important, you have to find the right level of goals. Enough so that it's challenging, but not too much. Otherwise, people are going to think from the beginning that it's going to be very difficult to achieve. Two other points linked to the teams. Empower employees to choose their work patterns and habits. It's going to be a huge, something huge, so that you show your employees that you trust them and you think they are autonomous and mature enough to be in a position to define themselves their right working conditions. The same for the last point, enable them to define the way they want to work together. Always with that kind of system, if people do define that by themselves, you have far more chance that is going to be implemented. Four other points which are highly related to management, communication, but in communication, not only frequent communication, by being sure that your communication is the most authentic you can. Building relationships, as we're in a culture of trust and psychological safety, relationship must be between bracket friendly. What is then absolutely clear is that the hierarchy remains and the roles are still very, very clear, meaning that the leaders and managers are still in a position to say what they say and what they have to say. Facilitate the whole person growth. We found that in many culture. Most importantly, the number 4, which is show vulnerability and ask and say when you think you have been doing mistakes. This is very, very important, because then doing that, you say very clearly that you are part of the team, and sometimes you make mistakes. This kind of thing is going to increase the trust your team has in yourself and increase the culture you want to build. Last but not least, what is very important is the way leaders are going to behave, because they are going to set the tone. And to do that, we often use mindfulness at work. Mindfulness are techniques to both enable people to stay concentrated on the present moment, but more importantly, increase their self-awareness and have a reflection on their thinking process, on the way they make decisions, and the other part, which is how they relate to others. And when they are more aware of their style, of the impact of their behaviors on the way the team works, on the communication, on that famous trust and psychological safety culture, they are going to change and move the way they work, so that it's going to reinforce and enable more that culture of trust and psychological safety. And the benefits of that kind of approach, other benefits is that it's going to increase their decision-making ability, because they'll take some time to reflect before deciding. It's going to increase also their capacity to being more aware, being more focused, and what is extremely important for that culture of trust and psychological safety is empathy and the way they communicate. We are at the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Michel. I don't know if there is a question. Let me have a look. No, there is no question from the audience. My question to you would be, I like so much the idea of fostering a culture of psychological safety and trust. And I guess this is really the base of the journey toward the innovation and then, of course, change of skill. How the change in the management's behavior should be done? What is, I mean, how we can work on the change to the management's behavior to foster this culture of psychological safety and trust?
Very often we start by having a work on having managers, top managers, and other managers work around the values. With two main areas, because it's a good way just to think again about the culture. But number one is to say, fine, what are our values today and what do these values means, you know, because the same word can have different meanings for different people. So that's the number one thing. The number two is to ask managers to say, okay, that value, what does it mean as far as the expected competency is concerned, and what does it mean as far as concrete actions are concerned? With the interest with the expected competencies is that those expected competencies, we are going to find them again in the annual appraisal, you know, so that we ensure consistency. And the second point around concrete actions is important because it's going to show everyone in the company that the process has started. We had such an assignment 2 years ago, and one concrete actions that the managers and the team did define was to completely change the way they do their meetings. Okay. They thought, okay, we spend a hell lot of time doing meeting where it's not efficient anymore, and so on and so forth. They said, okay, fine, we're going to have two types of meetings: short meetings when it's the daily problems, and longer meetings if we need to deal with more strategical questions. And for the shorter meetings, they said, okay, we're going to stand instead of sitting, so it's going to shorten the duration of a meeting, which is going to then last half an hour instead of an hour, and so on and so forth. And they implemented that nearly at the beginning of the process, so that people could clearly see in their day-to-day business that things had already changes, and it was not only another word or a buzzword like, okay, we're going to build a culture of psychological safety and trust. Okay, so one question from the audience, but really very quickly, Michel, because we are over the time actually. So how do you make sure that all this behavior doesn't disappear in case of big pressure? A very good question, actually. It's a next. Well, it's an excellent question. Well, you must be prepared. You must be prepared that in case of big pressure, the older behaviors are going to come back. It's very much linked to the human nature. To ensure that, or to make it more consistent, the annual appraisal is something important. Having defined those behaviors and those behaviors being in the annual appraisal, it's one thing. But during stress, if you see that we are back to the old behaviors. Leaders and managers have to be aware of that and gently bring people back with some very concrete actions and with their behaviors, just to ensure that we're not back to what we did previously.
Okay, thank you so much. Do not hesitate. I mean, you can write in the questions if there is any further details you would like to provide to the questions. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to move on and welcome Isabella Milewska. She is the Digital Skill Global Leader at Amazon Web Services. Isabella will really go in another direction, I would say, but also very interesting about how to find and hire the digital skills of the future. It's yours, please.
Well, thank you very much, first of all, for the invitation. It's really a pleasure to be with all of you today. And yes, I think it's a little bit a different perspective, more from a, let's say, business side as to what the business today needs in terms of what kind of skill set, what kind of talent is most sought after. And in this particular case, what it is that we look from, let's say, digital transformation perspective. And I'm going to use the results of a report that was published last year on the annual Global Knowledge, IT Skills and Salary Report, which had listed the 10 most important IT skills globally. And as you can see, cloud computing is number one. And then sort of the usual suspects, or more of the, let's say, the most common buzzwords that we all hear or read in the news and the magazines, that is cybersecurity, that is AI, machine learnings, and data analytics and data science, for that matter. How is that related to the sort of digital transformation and the change that needs to happen across the organizations? Well, the simple fact that is very much connected is that cloud computing has actually redefined how we provision IT infrastructure and how we do things, how we implement digital transformation. And the fact that we today discuss the scalability of artificial intelligence, the presence of Internet of Things everywhere, this is all backed up by the power of cloud computing. And therefore, we firmly believe that if you think about successful digital transformation in your organization, whatever the business sort of solution or business direction is going to head to, each organization should think about how to enable cloud skills and how to empower the entire organization to be familiar with what cloud computing can do. And the data speaks for itself. Cloud computing is continuously scored as number one hard skill companies are looking for the most. There's about, more than 3.5 million of cloud professionals worldwide. And there's just constant growth and increase of cloud-related vacancies. At the same time, there's just not enough talent that can fill those vacancies. And this has to do with how we approach cloud skills and how we think about ICT skills in general. We obviously are all aware that digital literacy is something that has to be invested into, but really digital skills is just the bottom of the pyramid. And in order to foster European competitiveness and creativity, we should aspire to equip all of our employees, all of the individuals around us, to get to the higher level of those digital skills, because the further we go, the more we are becoming digital creators rather than just digital users. And in the end, it is when we are becoming the creators of the sort of digital transformation, that's when we feel that we are providing impact for our teams, for our organizations, businesses, and at the end of the day, to the entirety of the society. So I mentioned that cloud is really the beginning of sort of everything when it comes to, or majority of things when it comes to digital transformation. But cloud adoption is not easy. And the reason for that is that it's not just about technology. It's not just about equipping ICT professionals with the up-to-date knowledge about what they need to be doing in order to make the most out of cloud. It's all about people and processes. Cloud has actually changed the way how we not only provision IT infrastructure, but also the way how the businesses are thinking about new products, new services. Everything is happening online. Everything happens through the internet. And that requires a lot of changes across all the entirety of each and every organization. The way we see it is that cloud skills are not just about technical skills, which obviously is at the core, but really it is about knowing how to deal with ambiguity, being comfortable with remote management, being able to make decisions based on the data, and operating with the data comfortably. And most important element in that respect is really passion for learning. The fact that technology trends are popping up every now and then and more frequently is because the innovation pace has been unprecedented. Every day there's a new feature, a new service, new product available that can foster digital transformation, that can speed up processes and so on. And only when we are open to learning and continue learning as we go along our professional career can we be successful with our professional life. This has also to do with being able to manage changes, both for the processes and for the entire organization. And so to summarize that aspect is that cloud skills are then a combination of both hard technical skills and soft and business skills. And those two elements are very much interlinked with one another. So to very shortly summarize how we see that cloud skills challenge being addressed and what we do at Amazon Web Services to foster it. First of all, we have created cloud role-based curriculum so that the training and the learning pathways that you think about when it comes to embracing cloud computing are basically channeled through the job role that you're currently having within the organization. And you could be a marketing manager, a procurement specialist, or equally a network administrator, and find your way through the cloud learning pathways in order to better understand how to make the most of it. Skills validation is very important because it is no longer that only the universities and the formal education is able to provide enough talent on the market. It is that we need to constantly update our skills and we need to do it faster. So industry-led certification allows us to validate our skills and have this being better visible to the potential employers or the current employer, so that we get better recognition for our updated skills. Education programs are very important, and AWS is investing in it quite heavily in order to, first of all, provide curriculum for post-secondary institutions, but also to work on the workforce development and address the non-traditional learners. I mentioned that formal education is no longer the only answer for producing new talent. I think we all agree that lifelong learning is the only answer for us to stay on the labor market and keep thriving. And finally, which actually is the essence of all the efforts, is that we learn to enhance our professional careers, to either be better within the current organization or to look for other opportunities. And at AWS, we also look at how we can connect the learners that are practicing their cloud skills with the potential employers who would be interested in taking up that new talent. There's a plethora of different education programs that are targeted for the current workforce that aims at reskilling and upskilling both the workforce of the government organizations, but also commercial or nonprofit organizations as well. We look at students and teachers, because obviously not only the students needs to uptake the new skills and new knowledge, the teachers are the foundations for how our education institutions are progressing and better meeting the expectations of the job market. And finally, working on innovative solutions with our education institutions. Obviously, and I am concluding with that slide, obviously, no private organization, no public organization can do it all and solve all the issues of the current workforce. I think it is fair to say that the only solution and the way to be successful at it is for the governments to work very closely with the industry and the education institutions in order to redefine how we equip the workforce of today and tomorrow with the skills that we know of today, but not necessarily we know what is the next trend, what is the next technology innovation of tomorrow. So with that, I'm going to conclude, and thank you for your attention. I encourage you to ask questions or to connect with me afterwards. We'll be happy to discuss any potential collaboration opportunities.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Isabella. That is really very interesting point of view. And indeed, this is the trend where absolutely digital skills are going toward, and it's very important. So you mentioned that cloud computing competence and the skill inside each company, and you mentioned the impact is not necessarily I would say, I mean, the people should have some technical skills, cloud computing, but also some soft skills, or this will thrive through some soft skills. In your opinion, which division these skills could be hired in, not necessarily IT department, certainly something else? Would you elaborate just a little bit on that one? Because that is interesting. Yeah,
of course, with pleasure. So obviously, when we think about technology, the first sort of recipient of the new training should be the IT department. But in fact, it's not. I mean, IT department needs to stay up to date. But really, if you think about what are the innovative ways marketing departments can explore with their products or services, how procurement or legal department is approaching the new way of provisioning IT services. And finally, the leadership needs to know what it is that you can do with cloud. Because obviously, we today think about setting up a new website, being interactive with our customers, making available, let's say, a museum artifacts being, for the audience online. All that happens in the cloud, and the ideas for innovative services are coming from every single department across the organization. And so we believe that there should be some basic foundations for understanding what technology can do for you in the context of digital transformation. And then if you want to sort of progress with more technical advanced skills, then obviously there's a whole plethora of training available for developers, for solutions architects, or infrastructure administrators. And then you as business owner can definitely speak the same language with the IT department to achieve the common goals.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, it's all the speakers always have very great insight to share, but then we need to move with the next speaker. Thank you very much, Isabella. So our next speaker is Lothar Merz. Lothar will be presenting how WashTec cleaning technology company, they improved their supply chain operation by really working on their employee skill and improving that part of the company. It's yours.
Merci. Bonjour tout le monde. Hello everybody. It's a pleasure to me to present the project that we made with WashTec Cleaning Technology with Mr. Katavis, who apologizes and regrets a lot that he can be part of this presentation. Just share my media. WashTec Cleaning Technology is a provider. It's the leading manufacturer of car washing machines with a high variety of different products like gantry car washes, tunnels, and they also provide accessories like chemistry and water recycling. And I'm sure if you have a car, you will have used one of these facilities, I'm sure. And they're located in southern Germany at Augsburg with 1,800 employees. They made about more than 3 million of car washes. They're more than 50 years old, and they're distributing in over 70 countries. They're very successful. The last years they were always growing, and by growing, not only growing in turnover, also growing in complexity. And this leads the company to high stocks, and the throughput time for an order increases up to 13 weeks, which means this is more than the market expected. So Mr. Katavis started an initiative, a project in the area of supply chain to tackle this problem. So and if you want to have everybody involved, it makes sense to have a common vision of everybody who's working with you, to get everybody into the boat. And therefore he designed a picture, and this is the supply chain vision of WashTec on an overview of the relationship of a supply chain at their company. Everything starts always at the customer side. This is at the top right side. And here we see the information flow and the material flow. And the goal is to to solve the different objective or the dilemma of the production and supply chain planning. On one hand, we have customer-oriented objectives like high reactivity, small throughput times, and of course, on time in full deliveries. And on the other hand, we have company-oriented goals like high productivity and low stocks. And to solve this, they started a digitalization project for the supply chain to transform the supply chain by synchronizing, on one hand, the performance with the demand of the customer. And how can you do that? So we established an architecture to trigger the whole supply chain, starting from the customer over the different supply chain steps. So in the situation of WashTec technology, we have the components and modules production area. We have an assembly for the different products and installation in the different regions. And for each of these different production supply chain steps, we have a detailed planning and scheduling. And for each of these different production steps, we have different circumstances, constraints, restrictions. And in each of these different areas, we can optimize by taking into account these different circumstances. Like, for example, in the detailed planning and scheduling in the components and module area, the utilization of the machines are very important. In the case of the assembly line, where we have a sequenced production line, it's very important to assign the different stuff to the right processes and tasks, depending on the skills and the qualification. In the area of the detailed planning in the installation, we have to align and to find time slots where all the different stakeholders are available. And this takes place in these different detailed planning and schedule modules, which normally we find in companies. They use Excel files and other applications. And in this case, they're all for optimizing resource optimization. In the same time, they're linked to a synchronization module, which is in our digital twin, which is shown above. And in this module, all changes in one of these different applications will be proved and synchronized with the schedules of the other production steps. So if there's a change, they can detect if there's an issue, an impact on other supply chain steps. So you get the transparency about the goals of each supply chain step, and on the other hand, to fulfill all the different orders for the customer. This is all add-on of the enterprise resource planning. We're sourcing all the data from the ERP system. In this case, it's SAP, and also the feedback data from the production areas, which we take from the manufacturing execution systems. So with this architecture, whenever we have a change in demand or performance, we can see the impact on the whole supply chain, and we can react locally and globally over the whole supply chain. Why is that important at WashTec? In the case of WashTec, the customer is not only ordering an order, they're involved, because to install a washing machine, they have to prepare a construction site. And therefore, he has to fulfill some task. And that's why we established in the installation planning a module where we integrated the customer in the fulfillment of different tasks depending on the construction type and the machine type. And then we defined milestones so that we can check at different milestones if the customer has fulfilled these milestones. And depending on these milestones, the supply chain will be triggered. For example, 6 weeks before they start to produce parts for an order, a milestone, the preparation of the construction sites, for example, the ground or something like that, must be fulfilled. If not, we will not go to the next production step by building, for example, modules. So everything is linked together, and that leads to different results. First, no surprises when they come to a construction site and they're not ready. Second, the people who are involved in this installation planning, like technicians, subcontractors, or external suppliers, will be available when the customer is ready, and it's very difficult to find a solution to plan the people if the customer postponed in a very short horizon. So to summarize what we have achieved, can say that with the digitalization of the whole supply chain and the integration of the different data of the different supply chain steps and the synchronization, WashTec is able to control the complexity, and it improves the communication and the cooperation between the different stakeholders, also the customer in this supply chain. And at the end, with the digital twin and with the decision support system by AI, it enables the people to get always the best results. To give you a challenge, and what were the results at WashTec? They had productivity increase by 24%, only in the assembly line, reduction of the stock levels by 70% at final product, and an decrease of throughput time from 13 weeks to 2 weeks. Thank you for the...
Thank you so much. There is a question. I'm going to share it on the screen. Did you measure the impact of before and after?
Yes. What we have done is we measured the key performance indicators like the stock levels and the throughput times at the beginning, and all the figures that I just mentioned were controlled by the controlling. So we had to prove that our system works, and it was not only the figures that we could show, because before we started with this project, they had a big tent where they stored all the final products because the customer wasn't ready. And after this project, this tent was empty. So this was very clear illustration of the performance.
Okay, thank you very much. There are questions in the tab. So there is one for Isabella, and she is replying. And there is one for you, Laurent, if you would like to maybe reply in the chat, in the question tab, actually, not in the chat. So with that, we end today's session with our speakers. And I would like to share with you what we are going, is that mine? Yeah. So what we are going to do next week, what's up? Okay. Next week is the episode number 7. It is around how to rely on an ecosystem for the digital transformation. So it is going to be exceptional episode, actually, because we will have 5 speakers. And why? Because these 5 speakers, they will be presenting how you can rely on a private and a public ecosystem together. And the session will be 15 minutes longer than usual, so that is okay. It is the second part of the section number 3, which is dedicated to the talent, indeed. And we are going to welcome Claudine Carigé from the Ministry, SMC for the Ministry State Communication. Media and Communication Department. Here we go. Marina Andrieux, she is from the coordination of the Digital Skills and Job Coalition. I'm tired. We are going to welcome also Hartmut Losch, Business Development Director from AMB Software, and Mauro Rocco, who is the CEO of Cap4 Lab. And finally, Anne Oberle, General Director from University of the Competence Center. So all these people really will show us how this ecosystem in Luxembourg in particular does exist and how we can rely on. So finally, I think Nathalie will show us the invitation. Register now for the next session. Maybe she's done it. I don't know. I don't see. Anyhow, so I would like to thank again Laurent, Michel, Isabella, Lothar for their time today and for the great insight and best practices and expertise that they shared with us. Looking forward to see you next week. Thank you so much.